In this week's Sage Advice Unfurled, we're exploring a number of things. Of course, now we're actually working through the compendium so we can narrate it for you. And what happened to my background? I clicked the wrong thing. Pretend I did the... See, this is what I get for being complimented on my transitions. Pretend I just did that awesome transition, but it ended this way instead. Seamless. Seamless and perfect. All right, as I mentioned, we're making our way through the Sage Advice Compendium, and I'm going to talk a little bit about armor class and how it's calculated today. So our first installment of Sage Advice Unfurled this week talks about how you actually calculate armor class and how it's affected by different armor types in D&D 5e. So the base armor class is 10 plus your dexterity modifier, and many of us know that already. But with armor, the base of that armor class becomes the armor value first. For example, chainmail just gives you a base armor class of 16. Now, keep in mind that some armor limits the amount of dexterity bonus that's applied to 2. So keep an eye on that column. If you're wearing armor that limits your dexterity bonus, it's usually to a maximum of +2. And then some armors like plate mail will remove it entirely. So you don't enjoy any dexterity bonus if you're wearing an armor type like plate mail. Additionally, some armor actually imposes disadvantage on your dexterity stealth check specifically. So keep that in mind if you're wearing noisy armor, but you also want to sneak up on fools. Some classes, of course, have unarmored defense like Monk and Barbarian, which allows them to add 2 stat bonuses together on top of that 10 AC base. And then, of course, there's another mechanic entirely for Draconic Bloodline Sorceress Origins, which gives them a base of 13 plus their dexterity. So all these feature differently. Now, some creatures have natural armor, which actually changes the base dexterity of 10 to whatever it is, and then an additional dexterity bonus. But a natural armor in place of any other secondary place, let's say leather armor, hide armor, is going to feature differently for creatures. So they have their own natural armor, which gives them a different base. And then their dexterity is calculated on top of that. And that is how base armor class is calculated in 5e D&D. So our second Sage Advice Unfurled entry this week speaks to the bonuses, limitations, and definitions of how armor is actually used. So as we know, you can only benefit from one armor type at a time. So for example, you can't have natural armor plus leather armor to benefit your armor class. Similarly, Draconic Resilience does not add with unarmored defense if you were to multi-class into, let's say, Sorcerer and Monk. Similarly, a Druid / Barb multi-class who's in Wild shape can either benefit from the natural armor of the shape that they've shifted into or unarmored defense from the Barbarian side of their multi-class, but not both. At least in that kind of sense, you get to choose which you go with, but they are not cumulative. Shield, of course, is an exception because it's a modifier. So when you equip a shield, you get a +2 modifier to your AC, and that's additive unless it's otherwise stated, like in a monk class where it says you can't use unarmored defense while you're equipping a shield, or any armor for that matter. Seeking cover is another option that can provide an armor class bonus that's additive to your current armor class. So if you're enjoying half cover, you get a +2 modifier to your armor class. If you're under 3/4 cover, let's say you're just peeking out around the corner of a building, then you enjoy a +5 additive bonus to your armor class. Spells, of course, can also provide temporary armor class bonuses that are additive, again, in addition to these to your AC. And then, of course, magic items provide their own armor class bonuses if and where they do, too. So, for example, a cleric with +1 chainmail, which gives an armor class of 17, holding a shield, which increases that armor class by 2 to 19, with Shield of Faith up, which further increases your armor class by +2 to a total of 21, and is finally half covered by a rock, which gives you an additive cover bonus of +2, has a final armor class of 23, and that's how armor class is calculated with multiple bonuses. Continuing with Sage Advice Unfurled today, I want to talk specifically about some clarifications around elf meditation or the trance trait or feature. This is one that comes up often, and it has various different applications for everyone. But the trance trait for elven folk doesn't necessarily mean you can pop off for 4 hours and get all your stuff back. It simply means that the benefit of 8 hours of rest and everything that comes therein, an elven kind player can achieve in 4 hours while in that trance. It doesn't mean that elves are also wide awake and completely in tune with their surroundings during these 4 hours. They're still somewhat vulnerable as they are semi-conscious at best. Additionally, this trance is still subject to the regular rules around long rest rules, which include, if interrupted, they must begin again, whether it's 4 hours or 8 hours or otherwise. They can only benefit from a long rest like anyone else once during each 24-hour period, and they must have at least one hit point at the beginning of that rest in order to gain the benefits of a long rest. So it's something to keep in mind as you're going through or playing with characters and racial benefits that speak to the trance trait, or the ability to go into a meditative state rather than full out sleeping. Another trait that's often contested as it relates to specifically wood elves and Lightfoot halflings is their ability to hide in plain sight. So the hiding racial traits for wood elves, Mask of the Wild, and Lightfoot halflings, called Naturally Stealthy, stipulates that they can try to conceal themselves in certain circumstances, even when observers are nearby. Now, of course, the conditions for these are that halflings have to be able to hide behind someone or something that's at least one size larger. And for wood elves using the Mask of the Wild trait, they have to be in conditions of heavy rain, mist, fog, or other natural obscurity in order to be able to use this trait. So it's not a matter of just like vanishing in front of someone's eyes. There are still conditions that have to be satisfied to be able to use that trait. Then, of course, the regular roles around stealth versus perception still apply when it is determined that they can even hide in the first place. So when these traits are used, they still have to be reinforced with a successful dexterity stealth check against an observer's potential perception check. Concluding Sage Advice Unfurled this week, continuing with the theme of racial traits as they relate to class traits, specifically Dragonborn sorcerers and the Draconic bloodline trait. So you are able to create a Dragonborn character who also draws arcane influence as a sorcerer under the Draconic bloodline sorcerer's origin. How that works is, first of all, there's no rule that states that a Dragonborn sorcerer has to choose the same Draconic bloodline as their sorcerer's origins. A blue Dragonborn could indeed have a red Draconic ancestor in the Draconic bloodline sorcerer's origin, better said. The racial feature actually comes from your heritage, so as a blue dragon, let's say in this example, and the Draconic sorcerer's origin bestowed upon you by a Draconic influence, item, focus, or otherwise. They're not assumed to be linked in any way unless the player chooses to do so. So if you are choosing a Dragonborn sorcerer and the Draconic Ancestry sorcerer's origin, they can totally be red, blue, white, green, whatever combination you want. They don't invariably have to reflect one another unless you want to do that as a player. So it's a good clarification between how to line up those particular race and class combinations as they benefit one another. And that's the end of Sage Advice Unfurled segment. 5 great items from the Sage Advice Compendium. We're going to continue this every week here on Saturday. Of course, at in the Speaking Common D&D live news podcast every Saturday, just like we did today. So you can look forward to more of that. In the meantime, shall we head back to the bar? Whoop!